So I'd like to speak now to distance learning, and then I'm going to ask Ken Janseric to speak to our Clarkston virtual. And I would like to start off by saying, what is Clarkston's distance learning? And I want to remind our families that this is temporary. It's a contingency plan. It is a solid replacement for our traditional face-to-face instruction, and it's going to serve us well until we can get back to face-to-face. It is real-time learning based on a structured schedule, and it's conducive to relationship building with teachers and classmates. We will build relationships via an online platform with our teachers and our students. And it's very important that our teachers know our kids and can connect with them in a learning format. What it is not, it's not a long-term solution. This is a temporary solution until we can get back face-to-face with our kids. It is not crisis schooling. And so I want to remind our families that we're not going to repeat what happened in the spring. This is nobody's fault, and we did our very best. But again, as I've said over and over, and I know Dr. Ryan has communicated it as well, it wasn't ideal for our teachers, our students, our families. So we will be instructing. Students will be learning. They will be showing up. And this model does include that we will be going to school. And it is not 8 hours a day on a computer. And we'll be talking extensively with our teachers, our subject area coordinators, our administrators. We know that research shows that it's not good for students to be on screen for an extended period of time. So we will be teaching. Students will be off, they'll be working, they'll be off screen, they'll come back. This is all led by teacher. We will be breaking into small groups. And what are the others doing when we have a small group? They'll be working independently, guided by the teacher. And so I just want to assure that it is not 8 hours a day on a computer. Tonight, if there's anything said, and I wanted to remind you that this is all written on our website. If you log in, there is a tab for Fall 2020. And you can access any of this information at any time. If you have a question, I urge you to go to our website just for clarification. And again, you can always reach out to us, but it is on our website. And I just wanted to speak to that it's a nice access for you to even further your understanding. I'd like to share a sample distance learning for the elementary. Again, this is a sample, but I think it's something that you could tap into to see what distance learning looks like. So again, this idea that we're going to school. And so students will log in at 8:30. We will start with a morning meeting, and you'll see this consistently Monday through Friday in a morning meeting as we just come together as a class with our teacher. Sometimes we talk about life skills. Sometimes we talk about what the day is going to look like, but it's a nice way to come together to start our day. We will have a co-curricular every day for our students. This is art, PE, world language, and music. There's a break and a snack. We're going to have some type of math lesson, some type of math work. Science and social studies will be taught. We have a literacy block. Community time is the way that we end our day. This is very important that we come back together to speak to our kids, to see how the day went, to offer up any learning, any questions, just to come together in terms of building relationships again, tapping into how kids are doing. And then at the end of the day, we have teacher office hours, and that's where teachers can communicate with their families. They can also use that as planning time, but their day does end at 3:50. I also want to point out that we've made a strong commitment in the secondary and the elementary that there is a consistent lunch period. And that is from 11:25 to 12:25, and you will see that at the secondary level as well. So families that have multi-age children can hopefully have this time together to eat, to get out, maybe get some exercise, play, etc. And I think that's very good for our families and our kids. If we look at the Wednesday at the elementary, I'd like to speak to this. It looks different and purposeful. So again, morning meeting, we have a co-curricular, and then there's this block of time of learning resources, strategy groups, and assessments. So this is a time where teachers can work with small groups, whether they're enhancements, working with advanced kids, working with kids that just need that added attention. And so teachers will design this time to do that. They can assess kids. Our special ed supports can tap in to pull kids for strategy groups. So it's a 2 block of times you'll see on a Wednesday, and those look different from Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let's look at secondary. Secondary, again, you will see that our learning day begins at 8:30 and it ends at 3:20. And you'll see first hour, second hour, third hour. Again, that consistent lunch time for our kids, as well as lunch and planning for our teachers. And so you'll be attending school 6 hours a day. This again does not mean that you will be on screen 6 hours. Teachers will be designing lessons and students will be off and learning with some independent time as well. And I want to highlight Wednesdays again because they look a little different. These enrichment tutorial connections. So on Wednesdays at the secondary level, we're thinking about extra tutoring that students might need on those days. You'll also see a block of time for social emotional learning, health and wellness support, support staff, outreach and education. Counselors can meet with kids. Our special ed services can tap into kids in addition to what they receive Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We have pause, we have wolf time that can occur during this time as well. So Wednesdays are a special day for wellness, and I think at the secondary level, we're calling them Wellness Wednesdays, Wellbeing Wednesdays, so it does look a little different to tap into the social emotional needs of our kids. Clarkston Virtual, I'm going to hand it over to Ken Chinsarek. He is our administrator for Clarkston Virtual. Ken?
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight a little bit more about Clarkston Virtual. To start off, we're going to talk a little bit about what really Clarkston Virtual is, but also what it isn't. In terms of what Clarkston Virtual is a flexible, self-paced learning model, allowing students to work at their own pace, but also being supported by Clarkston teachers, and as Mrs. Mahoney talked earlier, are also our Clarkston mentors serving as teachers. Clarkston Virtual is a strong option for working parents, as it does offer that additional flexibility in terms of the school day. Students don't necessarily have to start first thing in the morning or end at a certain time in the day. There's additional flexibility that allows families to offer more time during the day when it's convenient for them. Clarkston Virtual is aligned to the same standards as our traditional schools for both E5 all the way through 12th grade. Clarkston Virtual, really what it is it's an online platform that allows students to work at their academic level and really be pushed forward by their individual mentor. That online platform can also be adjusted by our Clarkston teachers serving as Clarkston mentors. So if they had students that needed a little bit more help, they could adjust and modify that curriculum to support the students. It just wouldn't be logging in and working through the modules. That teacher would have that input to work with them. Clarkston Virtual does give the options for families. So this is just one more option for families. If you were interested in virtual, this could be an option for you as a Clarkston family. And really one more thing that Clarkston Virtual is, it is a rigorous program. It is an online platform supported by the mentor, but it does offer a lot for those students looking for that opportunity. Really looking at what Clarkston isn't, Clarkston Virtual isn't, it isn't a program that requires daily attendance. So unlike the distance learning, Clarkston Virtual allows students to work at their own pace. They don't have to log in at 9 in the morning. They could start their day later in the day, but they would be working in terms of that pace and progress to complete their classes. Clarkston Virtual, it's not a good fit for all students, but it is an opportunity. When I say it's not a good fit for all, that individual student would have to be a motivated student and continue to work at their own pace and progress and utilize that feedback from their mentor to continue to work forward. Clarkston Virtual is not a rigid program without flexibility. It offers that flexibility for those students and their families to have some flex in their day or even their week. In terms of the 8 hours a day, it is not an expectation for a student, like Mrs. Mahoney said, to sit in front of a computer regardless in distance or virtual. We would not expect them to sit there for that 8 hours in front of the computer. In the elementary level, students would be supported with additional hands-on materials. And in the secondary, we really only expect the students to spend as much time in their virtual classes that they would in their traditional. One final thing is Clarkston Virtual is very different in terms of the distance learning. Yes, they're both done at home, but they have different components that make them very different. When we start to look at Clarkston Virtual, very similar to what we had shared before, there is a large amount of information on the website. We have frequently asked questions that we're updating all the time. On the website, you can look and see sample schedules as well as some curriculum information. If you need additional information, please continue to look back at our Clarkston Virtual website as we are updating it daily with new things for families. As you start to look at it, some families were reaching out saying, we really like the idea of virtual, but what could a sample day look like? So on the website, you do have some sample schedules. And as we move to the next slide, you'll see a sample of that elementary schedule. So within the elementary schedule, you'll see that in the morning, there's an opportunity for that mentor to connect, as well as in the afternoon. Mentors are going to have the expectation to work with students daily, to connect with them, to check on their pace, their progress, but also check in with them with that social emotional aspect to really ensure that they're making those connections and moving forward. You'll notice that there is lunch breaks through the day as well as additional activity breaks. This would just be a sample schedule. You'll notice there are no times for those activities. There's no start time, there's no end time. But this would be a sample of what elementary schedule could look like for a family. In the secondary, we did break down their schedule within the hour of the day. But once again, you see first hour all the way to sixth hour with their 4 core and 2 electives. But once again, there is no set time. Those students would be working through their online platform. And while working through their online platform, let's say they came to an opportunity where they needed a question answered, they would have that opportunity to reach out to that mentor as previously stated. That mentor would then get back to them or have an additional teacher working as a mentor in maybe a content area that they were struggling to reach back and get to them. Regardless, within both elementary and secondary, there are opportunities for set schedules, but also opportunities for a lot of flexibility for families. I'm going to now turn it back over to Mrs. Mahoney in regards to choosing that best fit.
Thank you, Ken. So choosing a learning option. So families, we'd like you to have this decision made by Monday, August 17th at noon. This is an extended deadline. We feel that this is a tough decision. We want you to make a good decision for your family, for your students, your children. So we're moving that deadline to Monday, August 17th at noon. No action is needed if preferred learning option is distance learning contingency for this future face-to-face instruction. Again, there's no action needed in going distance learning. So to enroll in Clarkston Virtual, it is through our website. You will see /Clarkston Virtual. We encourage you to access to enroll in Clarkston Virtual through our website, and to withdraw from Clarkston Virtual, again, it is that same website. Mary Ellen, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahoney. And I'm going to hand it to Kathy Christopher, our Director of Student Support Services, if we've got her on the line here.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right, welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for attending tonight. I know that people are very anxious, and I so appreciate the patience of our families. I know in particular for students with IEPs that there's a lot of nervousness due to the complex and diverse needs of our students. I just want to assure you that we are working hard to try to accommodate all of our students' needs in this ever-changing climate. And I don't have all of the details worked out, but I know I've communicated with a lot of you and hoping to have more details forthcoming. The information that I'm sharing tonight is something that you probably have already been aware of. It's on our website, but I just thought briefly we could go over this. Again, looking at the purpose of the IEP, it's highly individualized, so it won't be one size fits all. But just to provide some general information that all IEPs will be reviewed at the start of the year in collaboration with parents. Nothing will be changed until we are able to communicate with parents. We will follow the district and the state guidelines in regard to how we're providing services, but we have some flexibility for students with IEPs currently in our remote learning format and our virtual learning format. We do intend to provide in-person IEP services as appropriate based on an individual student basis. We'll be reviewing the IEPs to determine what services are most appropriate and in what format. It could be a combination, or for our students with more complex needs, there might be more services provided in person. All our students will be assigned a special ed teacher, those students that have an IEP, including our Clarkston virtual. I know there's been some questions about whether or not that special ed teacher would be the same special ed teacher that worked with the student in the building. And at this time, we can't make that commitment, but there will be a teacher that will be consistent that will be assigned. Likely we will identify a special ed team that will support the virtual school. This next bullet just applies if we happen to shift to a phase 1 to 3, that all of our special ed services then would be provided remotely, but following more of a synchronous model so that there is more interaction between staff and students. Accommodations has come up a lot with parent concerns. Accommodations that are drafted in IEPs will continue to be implemented. Some may or may not be still appropriate if you're choosing a virtual format, but those again would all be reviewed and assessed based on student needs. Special ed transportation will continue to be offered as needed. If students are participating in in-person any services, and that's something that is required, again, based on eligibility within the IEP, and masks would be required on our transportation. Can you flip the slide, Mary Ellen? Evaluations for students with IEPs will be done in person if we're in a phase 4 or higher, following our safety protocols that we've outlined, and the choice of how we're going to proceed if we shift to a phase 1 or 3 would be in collaboration with parents. IEP meetings will be offered in person or virtually moving into the school year, but virtual for those that found that easier to work around your schedule will certainly still be an option. Within special ed, particularly since we are having students access buildings to participate in in-person services, we will follow very cautious safety protocols, including more distancing, smaller class sizes, and we will provide more details in regard to that. Training and support for students, in particular related to technology, has been requested, and we plan on organizing something fairly comprehensive and hopefully something that we can do virtually with parents to help them navigate some of the new technology, particularly that technology that might be new to some of our students with IEPs. While we kind of navigate these next phases, trying to pivot with some remote learning now, we know that this is bringing our parents a lot of stress and anxiety, and we hope to be able to organize the details, more specific details to share with you in the next week. The week of the 24th at the latest, IEP teams will be reaching out to share what those specific details will be, and final decisions will not be made without convening meetings with parents. We know communication is critical at this time and always, and we're hoping maybe to create a forum similar to this just for parents of students with IEPs, knowing that the needs are unique, and knowing that there's a lot of still questions that have gone unanswered. So appreciate you attending.
Okay, so we're at the point in our program where we are going to address questions that we received prior to the start of this forum. We received quite a few questions, in fact, and so we're going to do our best to get to as many as possible tonight. But we selected the questions that we saw multiple times in one form or another, same questions repeated, or questions that we thought were of interest to a broad audience. So for this part of tonight's event, Mrs. McLean and I will be reading the questions that you guys submitted, and members of our panel will address them. So our Q&A will follow a similar order to our presentation. So we'll start with questions about distance learning, and Mrs. McLean will get us started with some of those questions. And Mrs. Mahoney will be responding, or any panelist who has any input in a question that's asked, please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
All right, so our first question comes from Jameson, and she asked, if enrolled in virtual for the semester, may a student attend face-to-face for band or orchestra? And how, if so, how will that work?
Yes, we are joining Clarkston Virtual with our music courses. We will not be starting face-to-face, so this will be distance learning. So a student enrolled in Clarkston Virtual can join music through distance learning.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nicole. Will parents need to be in the same room as students? For instance, she has a second grader. During the distance learning sessions, will parents have to assist with the students during the, quote, school time?
This is a very good question. I think it really depends on the independence of the child. I'm assuming at the beginning, our young learners will need help being supervised, as well as possibly launching the distance learning. But I think quickly we're going to get masterful, and our students, just like we see in our classrooms every day, they learn quick and they will be able to get on and receive instruction and learn. But I do believe our younger learners are going to need an adult for supervision, just to kind of guide them through their day. Yes.
Great. Our next question comes from Jennifer, and she asks, will secondary students have online instruction with their actual teachers each day?
Yes. 100% yes.
All right, next we have a question from Joy. How will the DEEP program work? Will our students enrolled in this program be attending classes online with the college instructors, or will this be per the discretion of the college itself? And will they be allowed, will they be allowed to have classes at the high school during distance learning?
This is a good question too. We did get notification from U of M Flint for our DEEP courses that they are going online in a distance learning format as well. So our students enrolled in DEEP will be receiving instruction through U of M Flint professors online. Then they will join Clarkston in distance learning. They'll be able to join Clarkston teachers for their other hours.
All right. Next from Ellen, does Renaissance High School have the same options of learning? And are they also going to be taught by Renaissance teachers if the distance learning option is chosen?
Yes, 100% yes.
Okay. Next, Christine asks, if 4 to 5 families with elementary age children in the same grade at the same school wish to create a pod for distance learning, will the administration honor requests for students to be placed with the same teacher?
This is a very good question. And I understand that parents are considering these pods, and I think it's wonderful. I definitely would take this back to our principals for consideration. I think we want to service our families the best way we can to support our distance learning models. This is very good, and I would like to take it back to our elementary principals for consideration. Thank you. That's a good question.
I think I'd like to add in on that response too. Looking at pods, I think we'd be supportive of trying to make those type of innovative things work. But I would, right from the get-go, want to caution parents to be very, very careful, in creating pods, all the safety things that you would have to be concerned about at school, of where you put your child, you'd have to very much take care. I always put a word of caution before I put one of my children, even one of their friends. I always call and talk to parents. I try to get to know everything from, how that house is set up to potential things like firearms. And I don't mean to be alarmist, but you want to have a good sense of where your child's going. So I would just, in a school setting, obviously we have individuals that are background checked. I would just be careful. We want to assist families, but we want it to be cautious, and be difficult for us to look at that level of responsibility as we go into each house of potential grouping across the district. But I think that would be a good charge of the administration to our building level to see if we can make things like that possible. Anytime in this interim period that we can make opportunities for kids to have social connections with each other and support each other between families, I think it's definitely something this community we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Okay, our next question comes from Sarah. She has a kindergartner who can kind of use a tablet, but does not know how to use a computer. She's also very shy on video calls. How will these things be handled or addressed?
Another very good question. So our young fives through first grade will be utilizing an iPad. We believe that that tablet is friendlier, easier to use for our young learners. And we will certainly partner with our parents, again, to get this started in terms of tip sheets, any communication that we can to join, to partner, to get those students online in front of their teachers and working and learning. I think that we have students that are shy, and we definitely need to embrace, and I guess I say we don't shy away from our shy kids in terms of meeting them human to human and really growing our relationships and connecting with our kids. At some point, I think to start off the year, we need one-on-one invitations, meetings with our kids to get to know who they are and how they operate and their fears, their dreams, their likes, their dislikes, and how we can best serve our students and our families. So I just want to assure our families that our teachers will connect. They're interested. They can't wait to get to know their students. I think overall it's going to be a positive experience.
And I would reemphasize on Ms. Mahoney's comment, students and their families. You know, I would like to look, especially as we look at our elementary families getting acquainted, you know, getting to meet the teacher, you know, having mom and dad have that connection, be able to voice their concerns, their questions, and not just on the first day or the first week, but at intervals to have opportunities to make sure that there's communication going back and forth. If we look at anything, at least the technology spot as far as a strength is, we can very quickly, as we are tonight, and not having to travel or drive, to be face-to-face with one another. And we should maximize that asset the best we can.
We always think about that triangle, teacher, student, and parents, in terms of communication and how we can best work to, for the success of our kids.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question comes from Krista. She says, my son has been in the construction tech program for the last 2 years and had planned on a third year this school year. This class is a 2-hour combined class with math. With this class being hands-on, how will this play out in distance learning?
This is where the creativity of our teachers shine, and we're not going to disband or eliminate construction tech. And I believe in those teachers, and I believe they're going to create a hands-on experience at home, and that's what our teachers are definitely designing through our subject area coordinators, our CTE courses. We're going to keep them alive. We're going to do our very best to keep those students moving forward in those content areas.
Great. All right, next we have a question from Melanie. If 2 Pine Knob Elementary first graders have different first grade teachers, are they going to be following the same curriculum day to day so that they would be doing the same assignments and could work together?
We are going to follow the same curriculum, absolutely. Our teachers will be united in terms of PLC, in terms of conversation and what's best for their kids. I can't promise day to day because I want to be student responsive in terms of teaching and learning and where students are, but they will be aligned. We're going to be as consistent as possible to keep those classrooms going in the same direction. So I think that it'll work. But I can't promise day to day, but I can say alignment, absolutely.
Great. All right, next we have a question from Leanne. Will the district be providing weekly learning packets of printed information for assignments, especially for elementary students? Could we have designated pickup times each week to obtain printed materials?
I think this is a good question, and daily packets, weekly packets is something that we need to explore and talk about. I do know that we will be having ongoing pickups, and we're going to try to minimize that, of course, but I even think about our learning commons and how book checkout can go, curbside pickup. We've got math manipulatives, we've got technology, these kinds of things that we want to service our families. So I thank you for that question. I think we'll take it back to the team. In terms of those hands-on materials, we're really being conscious of sharing materials, and we want students to have their own. So I appreciate that question, and definitely a point to explore.
Great. All right, our last question in this section comes from Kathy. She asks, for the temporary distance learning option, will students be assigned a teacher who would remain the same if they were to transition to in-person learning?
You know, this is a question that we certainly want to think through extensively, because with the shift of students going to Clarkston virtual and the shift of teachers, we're being very mindful, you know, the relationships and, you know, John, I don't know if you want to shed some light in terms of staffing and what's happening, but we're going to be very mindful of our students and keeping relationships positive with our teachers. Absolutely.
Sure. So yes, that would be our intent. If when we do come back to school, we will be able to transition those classes from distance learning to brick and mortar. Because our virtual program and the large amount of students that are migrating out of our brick and mortar buildings, you know, we will have to take a strong look at our staffing halfway through the year if there's a big migration back at semester break. But it would be our intent, if those classes, once we go back to school, to move those distance learning classrooms right back to brick and mortar with the same teacher.
And let me even add a little more emphasis to that. You know, if you're in a distance learning format with your Clarkston teacher that you're starting the year with, I stand behind, and I would even stronger state that when you return to brick and mortar, when we make that transition, and I like to think that when we will make that transition, you'll be with your teacher. What I think Ms. Mahoney and Mr. Lucida are just highlighting, that the students that are in the virtual program are making that selection for the term, the semester, and that when they leave that program potentially, come back into in person, then because of the staffing of them moving, we have to calculate for all the students that want to move, and we might have to open some additional sections for students coming back in. So I think we want to be flexible with our families, but we'll have to shift teachers with that. And that even, to me, provides a good time even to look at, you know, why can't they just come in at any time? And I know that question will come up several times, but you have to look at that independent nature of the virtual program. You know, looking at, if you take 2 algebra classes, 1 through distance learning and 1 through virtual, they'll have the same objectives. Same thing with second grade. They'll have the same learning objectives across the term, but they're not necessarily going to be aligned from day to day or week to week, or even the pacing, as we said in the virtual spot, of being in a position where they have the students to have flexibility in how they progress through there. And obviously, when we move back into that in-person learning, if you're on a completely independent track, it would be incredibly difficult for you to move into that mode of learning where it would be in person, because of the alignment with the curriculum, not because of any other reasons, but we have to make sure that kids have some integrity in their experience and some continuity of their learning. So we're going to hit that a couple times in the rationale, I know, as we kind of progress that. But that was a big salient point in my family as we discussed of, you know, why are we not, and what are our options in terms of moving. So it's all attached. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pick it up here with a question from Jessica. She says, is there going to be an option for kids whose parents work during the day, where the kids can go at their own pace? And this sounds like a question for you, Ken.
Absolutely. The Clarkston virtual platform really allows families to work at their own pace. So you're asking a question in regards to if the families work during the day. Absolutely. That student could get started later in the day. That student could get started on some of the content that they feel more comfortable with, and then work on other things later in the day and work at their own pace.
Okay, great. Thanks. Jennifer has this next question. She asks, what is the process for a student to get academic assistance in Clarkston virtual learning? Do questions go through the CCS mentor, or does the student have direct access to a CCS teacher? How will that assistance be provided? Is it an email, a video chat, text, or a direction to look at an online video? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So if a student was working through the online platform and they were to get to a point where they were struggling, there would be all of those modes of communication would be available for that student to reach out to the mentor. Now, as they reach out to that mentor for additional assistance, it would be similar to raising their hand in class, but rather than just raising their hand in class and having the teacher step over, there would be a moment in time where that mentor would have to get back to them. In the virtual model, what I would highly recommend with families is as they are working through this, and I'll be working with my mentors to work with families and students, when you get to a point where you're struggling, let's say it's in a fourth grade math assignment and you're struggling with a content area in math, you may leave the math class and then start working in your ELA or your science or social studies. And then when that mentor gets back to you, that would be an opportunity to get that additional assistance. In regards to the mentor and the teacher, for Clarkston Virtual, we utilize Clarkston teachers as the mentors. In the secondary, there might be some additional academic assistance needed for maybe a content-specific question, but all of that interaction would start with a mentor, and then if needed, escalate to another content person.
Thank you. And before I get to the next question, I just want to say we see a few hands raised to ask questions and also some Q&A questions people are typing in. And I wanted to let you know, we're not doing like a live format where we would invite you to come on and ask your question live, but you can put them in that Q&A, and we're scrolling through, and I see some already that I know are addressed in the emails that we received earlier. So we're going to be looking at the time, and we're going to address those questions in the Q&A depending on how much time we have here at the end. So our next question comes from Courtney. And she says, I still don't have a clear understanding on how much teacher-led instruction will be provided through the virtual program. Since there are no required login times and learning is mostly self-paced, how much self-teaching and or parent handholding will be needed for elementary students as part of this approach? Will students be receiving video instruction as part of each lesson?
That's a great question. That's always often a question when we start looking at the idea of virtual and utilizing an online platform. So with the work that I've done with online as well as a teacher and administrator, really looking at that idea of combining that online platform with some of those amazing things that we do within the classroom. So when you start talking about the face-to-face, the Clarkston mentors will be spending time in the beginning and the end of each day connecting face-to-face with students using Google Meet. But also time during the school day. So to connect that back to an elementary, the elementary teacher may spend some of the time in the morning connecting with students, but then utilizing the data from the online platform and the information from the students, pulling smaller groups of students in an online platform to maybe do a reading, a writing, or a math lesson. In regards to the parent hand-holding, that's a tough one because when we look at the progression from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, we often have a different variety of independence level with students. There is a level in any at-home learning where the family would be involved. With the online virtual, there is a little bit more of being self-paced and having some additional input. As you move into the high school, the students would be on their own working through it and then getting those support. When students talking about receiving video instruction, the video instruction would be more for support, reteaching, or an intervention to support the students, not necessarily the first round of instruction for the students.
Great, you explained that really well. Kimmy asks, I need to withdraw my son from the program. How do I go about this? And this is something that I've seen as families are, now that we're going to a distance learning contingency, are starting to reconsider their decision, and maybe they already filled out the enrollment form. How can they go about withdrawing?
It's a great question. I've had a lot of emails about that here in the last couple days. What we did is we made a similar for enrolling into virtual. We utilized a Google document or a Google form where the families can find it on the website under Clarkston Virtual, and it's under the withdraw from Clarkston Virtual for fall 2020. And all they would have to do is utilize that Google form and submit that Google form back over to me, and then I will remove them from the list for Clarkston Virtual for the fall.
I want to follow up with that one as well. Looking at why you would do that and what your expectations and hopes for the future. If you're thinking that you want to enter the distance learning format because you like the idea of it being more that during the day instruction that's structured for the Clarkston teacher from moment to moment, and you still like the elements that it feels safe to you as a family, and you would not want to go into school, but you like the aspects of having it outside of school and with a Clarkston teacher outside the virtual, I would also caution you to look at it as it might not stay that way, right? There's a strong possibility that that distance learning format will then convert back to face-to-face. And I understand every family will have to look at their own tolerances and what they feel like is best as far as re-entering to school, but that will be the modem that you have to expect if you enter the distance, that there is a probability high that we will be back in school face-to-face. So I just want you to, as a family, discuss that. It's weighing on our family, looking at not limiting options, but wanting to get that face-to-face instruction as quickly as we can. So I just want to make sure our families hear that too.
That's great. To clarify that, Abby wants to know how she can access the Pearson course catalog. She says that would be very beneficial to be able to see the courses offered through Clarkston Virtual before making a decision. Can you, Ken, remind her how she can do that?
Absolutely. So as we add additional information to the Clarkston Virtual website, we have added a tab in there for the curriculum for Clarkston Virtual. So all you would need to do is go to the Clarkston Virtual and then scroll over to that tab for the curriculum. You'll notice that the course catalogs are there, and I've had some additional requests to see some sample things, and I will work with Mrs. Rowe in terms of getting additional information on there as we receive questions regarding curriculum.
Okay, Kimberly emailed and said, can you please explain how the mentor will be assigned and clarify the difference between mentor and teacher?
Absolutely. The mentor is going to be assigned using many things. We're going to utilize the grade level of the student. We're going to utilize what school that student was coming from. If I had a handful of students coming from one of the elementaries, I would work to keep those students together because we are going to be utilizing some Google Meets. That way they would see a familiar face. I'm also receiving some requests, as Dr. Ryan mentioned earlier, about families wanting to work together. I would also utilize that in terms of looking at my mentors and assigning them appropriately. Be very similar to the amount of work that goes into assigning students for an elementary school. A great deal of time goes into picking and choosing and really taking a lot of information in to make sure we're finding that right fit. And we'll utilize some of those same things with the mentor and the students. The difference between the mentor and the teacher, one thing that Clarkston does is we do go above and beyond when we start looking at that mentor. We do utilize Clarkston teachers for that mentor. We do utilize them. So when we start utilizing the term teacher and mentor, they can almost be used together because we use our teacher as mentor. That mentor really fits the need of the pupil accounting of what we look at for the two-way interaction with those students.
Okay, and last one for you, Ken, comes from Katrina. She says, I signed my 2 children up for Clarkston Virtual a couple of weeks ago. Is there any way I can check and make sure it was processed correctly? Can you talk a little bit about the follow-up for these families that did enroll?
Absolutely. So Friday of last week, I did send an email out to all the families, and I utilized the email addresses that they used from Clarkston Virtual in the Google form. So I sent an email out just really explaining thank you for applying and looking into Clarkston Virtual. Additional information will come. Since Friday of last week, I have received a handful of additional inquiries about signing up for Clarkston Virtual, and Friday of this week, I will take those families that are requested to be out of Clarkston Virtual and utilize the families that still want to be in and just send another email updating them in regards to Clarkston Virtual. If for some reason you haven't received one of those emails, you can email me and I will check for you to verify that you have signed up for Clarkston Virtual.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, our next set of questions will be for Mrs. Christopher in the special education area. So first we have Mary, who asks, my daughter has an IEP. What kind of help is there for her?
So there is help, and it will look different for each child. It could be help by a special ed teacher who is connecting remotely with your child. It could be group instruction, remote, or it could be in-person services. It just depends on the individual child, and the special ed team will reach out to you directly to talk about what those services will look like specific to your daughter.
Great.
And I need to emphasize that. I'm sorry, on the special ed side, I feel like every department is definitely under areas that I'm fully vested and want to emphasize. And I want to reemphasize what Ms. Christopher just said. It was a very big concern on Monday night. We will bend over backwards as far as we can to make sure that our students that are receiving support services have that variability of what they need, whether it is in person, whether it's distance, whether it's in groups. Just to reemphasize, those are some really important points to make sure that, you know, we know that we have to go not only the extra mile for everyone to try to make this work, but we have to look at our most at-risk learners to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything. And I really applaud Ms. Christopher's efforts going to be, as far as her and her team, looking at each child and looking at not only what the needs of the child are, but the comfort of the family in terms of how and what modem that this support takes place in. So I've told her that she has my 150% support to make sure that these transitions, whether it's virtual or distance, are there, and that we know that there's such a variety of different needs, and no two different students receiving LRC support in my book are every story is different and needs to be treated that way. And I think it's really important that that's emphasized. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Haley, who asks, when you refer to children with IEPs, does that include children with 504 plans? If not, do you have a plan in place for those with 504s?
So an IEP and a 504 are different. So any information that we're sharing in regard to students with IEPs is not the same as students with 504 plans. If your child has a 504 plan, that will be reviewed whether you're enrolled in virtual or you're enrolled in more traditional Clarkston or remote, and they'll review those accommodations to determine how they can best implement those accommodations with whatever platform you've chosen.
Okay, great. Next, we have Jeanette, who says, it states that virtual students with IEPs will be assigned a special education teacher. Is this a special education teacher at their home school?
And I kind of referenced that earlier. Not necessarily. It depends on how many students are going to be enrolling at that level in virtual. If there's just a few students at a particular level, we may look and tap into that building. But in general, we will assign a special ed team to that virtual program.
Great. Next, we have Deborah, who asks, my son will be going into the 9th grade. He needs support in math and science. How will he receive that? Last year, he was co-taught, and we didn't feel it was very supportive for him.
So it'll look different, a lot different than it did in the spring. Your student will have their schedule like they would in a traditional school, including their support hour. That support teacher will be in frequent communication with your child, likely daily during that class, and then also be available to support navigating the other classes.
Right, great. Next, we have Barbara. What does the school year look like for students in the post-high program?
So we are working out the details. We know that this is a particularly unique program, or the services with our adult transition. A lot of the services and a lot of the experiences that the students in that program participate are in the community. We are not going to do any community outings or opportunities now under the circumstances, but we will look at other meaningful instruction that's occurring within the buildings that we can continue with, and that likely will be in smaller groupings. Again, in-person opportunities, and we just haven't worked out the details of the scheduling. That will be done in partnership with parents.
Great, thank you. And our last question in this area comes from Pauline, who wants to know which platform is best for a student with learning disabilities.
Well, that's a tough one. So I think that any choice, whether it's remote or in person or virtual, really is heavily dependent on the individual student, what their skills and needs are, in addition to the parents, the ability to support the student, how independent the student is in navigating that curriculum, would say the biggest distinction would be if the student is fairly successful navigating the general ed curriculum and fairly independently, then I think they would be successful in either of the platforms. If a student has more complex needs and requires more significant support, then I think we found that students sometimes will struggle more in that virtual and would benefit from the continuum of supports provided for remote or in person.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Our next question comes from Melissa tonight. She says, on the distance learning sample schedule, Wednesdays list enrichment, tutoring, and wellness. What specifically will students be doing on this day? Can we talk about how Wednesdays are going to be a little bit different in our district?
Yeah, so when you look at the secondary schedule, there is a check-in with each hour that is about 20 minutes long. That could be a check-in with the teacher for a quick tutoring. It may be checking in as in small groups with students to be able to communicate with each other what some of their learning is. It could be an enrichment that the teacher wants to add into it. The other parts with the well-being and the social, emotional, and connections, that could look very different. It could be a lot of different things. One of the things is wolf time or pause. If you're at the middle school, it's pause. And if you're in the junior high and the high school, it's wolf time. And our Renaissance is community time. And so it is an opportunity for our students to connect with those teachers, to build relationships, have those connections, check in with one another, have that mental health component be a part of it. It allows us to have those connections with them. It is also a time that perhaps our counselors will pull students together, or our social workers will have some opportunities to connect with our students in one-to-one or in small groups, and what that looks like. When we look at the elementary, again, it could be a lot of different pieces. There's still the morning meeting and the community time, and so that will be consistent, as well as the co-curricular. And then there's opportunities for connecting with students academically as well as well-being, as Mrs. Mahoney stated earlier.
Thank you. Jacqueline asks, is the district doing anything for the mental health of students, which you just addressed some of that. Is there anything else that you can share, Stacy?
Yes, so having those check-ins, it is part of the Michigan roadmap that we do have frequent check-ins with our students and look at that and understand where they're at. If they happen to not be checking in with teachers each day, we're following up with that on why. We do have social workers in every one of our buildings, and they will be checking in with students as well as our counselors. And if there is a need, we do have partnerships with Easter Seals that if there is a need for additional support and help for our students. In addition, we are also adopting, as part of our one-to-one technology, what's called Beacon, and it will allow us to have alerts to anything that students might be writing in a chat or searching that might have any indication about self-harm and or suicide. And so that will give us an alert and allow us to respond and react with our social workers, counselors, and administrators.
Okay, and we'll talk.
Looking along those lines, just to kind of add in, I want Ms. Puzio, if you can re-emphasize that. I think everybody, hopefully by now, knows that part of upping our game for both in-person and for our distance and virtual learning is having that one-to-one technology, having students all issue their own very own piece of technology to connect with the world of Clarkston schools. And it's not simply something that you pick up at Best Buy and hand out. It's one that's been modified by the school district, so in the hands of students. And I'll have Ms. Puzio restate that point too, and I have a couple other things to add. But can you please add, and I can ask Ms. Harrison as well, who's our technology director. I think that's absolutely huge for families to understand what's on our computers.
Yes, so having supports and having the ability to monitor where our students are at, both in how they're doing technology with GoGuardian as well as with this Beacon, that allows us to be alerted. We will get an alert automatically to the social workers, counselors, and administrators that allow us to see perhaps what a student is typing or searching, that has an alarm for us to respond and react very very quickly to it. And that is something that will be a part on each device that is school issued from our technology department.
Okay, well said. But I'd like to add even emphasis on that. To me, you know, what's more and even higher, that's a great thing to have, but even more effective, I think, is our families and our teachers, our parents who are in contact with our kids, who see them not, in their opinion, going in a good direction, or they're in a spot where they seem depressed, sad, disinterested in something that feels alarming at home. Obviously, I want everybody to know that we have full support staff here that's ready, but we need to have that two-way communication. I'm going to put that emphasis with our families too. When in doubt, email somebody in our, either your administrative team, your teacher, your superintendent, anybody at the school that you feel like you need that extra support, because we're working on both mental health supports for students that are out of school, which is tremendously difficult. You know, that potential isolation, everything goes around along with not being in school. But there's also, we were planning on the other half as we continue to plan for in-person learning, you know, looking at that option as it materializes down the road in this fall. We also see that potential students coming in struggling with mental and social issues just on the return, and the stress that's involved with the world right now, and being around people, and knowing that no matter what step that our students and families take, there's a tremendous amount of stress out there. And I think we need to recognize it, name it. I'm not afraid of it to look at, to say that we have to keep that on the tip of our minds. And that's why, if you wonder why we emphasize that kind of time within our school week to make sure that those contacts and those conversations are taking place, is that we need to nurture those relationships. We need to nurture and support mental health. We need to nurture and support the socio connections, and making sure that families, again, know that there's a place that they can reach out to. Our teachers are going to do their best. Obviously, with a lot more FaceTime and individual contact, I think it's going to be a lot more apparent when students are struggling. But it's not going to be okay just to drop out or disengage. We're going to find you in a loving way, I'll say. But people are not going to. This is school, and just like in regular school, if a student would ever look like they were disengaged or struggling, or were not showing up to school, we would take steps to make sure that they were supported. And we don't look at it as in a punitive way. We look at it as a questioning, what can we do to help? How can I help? How can we engage? How can we get through this together? Because even the transition as we make that move back into school is going to be, it's going to take adjustment. And although I think sometimes kids arguably adjust better than adults, in my experience over the years, we can't discount the experiences that our kids are going through. And I think as parents, we need to ask our children, you know, that question every day: how are you feeling? How are you doing? How is this working for you? And if we're not getting the right answers as moms and dads, and we know that, we know the feel for our kids, then it is absolutely responsibility in my mind, if you feel comfortable. And obviously people reach out to pastors and priests and other connections, but I want you to know your school is part of that equation too, and that we're going to be here for you. And we think that we need to put a lot of effort and support into these areas, and we intend to follow through. But I'm just asking it to be a partnership as we go. Thank you.
And we recognize the importance of relationships. And so when you look at the elementary schedule, where there is a morning meeting and community time every single day, that is a part of our students connecting with their peers as well as with their teacher. And so that is an important piece of that. In our secondary as well, what are the check-ins that even very quickly that our teachers can implore right in each of those hours? How are you doing? What might you need right now? So it's not just on those Wednesdays, it is a continuation throughout. And we are stating, especially the first couple of weeks, it's about the relationships. And that's what we need to build, and that's what we need to support.
Okay. One more question for you. This comes from Teresa, and she asks, how will the school be handling blessings in a backpack and free and reduced lunches?
Thank you. So our food service is finalizing the schedule and the planning for what that is. We will be offering lunches and or breakfast for our students. It is going to be for any students. If you are a paid student, then it would be a paid breakfast and lunch. And if you are if you're a student who receives free or reduced lunch, you will have a free or reduced breakfast and or lunch that you will have. That is going to be right now, the plan is for that to be once a week, that you would pick up for the 5 days worth of school, those meals, and you would be able to take those home and have that in place. The Blessings in a Backpack is something that we hold dear to our hearts here in Clarkston, and that is something that's been continued throughout the food distribution in the summer. And I anticipate, I do not know this for sure, but I do anticipate that that will be something that will also continue and will be part of that time with the food distribution that we have, that we will put into place and communicate that out to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Our next round of questions have to do with technology. So Mrs. Harrison will be answering those for us. Our first question comes from Colleen. Will the school provide each student with a laptop or a way to do this virtual online schooling?
Yes, we're going to provide young fives through first grade with an iPad and second grade through 12th grade with a Chromebook.
Okay. Next, Wendy asks, will virtual learning students be loaned Chromebooks or are those only for distance learning students?
Virtual students are Clarkston students, and they will also be part of the one-to-one program, and they will receive Chromebooks.
All right, moving right along in that direction. Brooke is wondering when and where do we pick up our students' district provided technology?
So we're working really hard right now to organize all of the devices. We're still expecting some devices in. We are going to put together a plan. It will probably look similar to what it did in the spring. You'll pick devices up at your school. We're going to check them out through Destiny and assign them to your family like we do a library book. And as soon as I hope to have some more information by the end of this week so that we can start putting some dates together to get those devices in the kids' hands.
And I'll continue to put that in my Friday updates and other information as we gain it.
Thank you both. Finally, we have a question from Mary. If we received a device in the spring, what should we do with it?
So families that receive the device in the spring should hang on to it. We're going to assign those to those families through Destiny. We're going to set up some time to get back Chromebooks from the young fives through first grade because they now need an iPad. So we're going to set that up so that they can exchange that Chromebook for an iPad, and we're hoping to kind of do all of that when we deploy the devices to the families, and we're going to get some dates out really quick when that's going to happen.
Okay, and now we have a handful of, we're just calling them miscellaneous questions that anyone can jump in on, and they're not all easy answers. So let's just jump right in. Stacy asks, why are we deciding each week what is being done? Can't we just make a date and go back?
I'll field that one. That was right up my alley. To be clear, I am monitoring this, I'll say every day, week to week, but it's not going to be an end of a week decision. I don't want parents to feel like that they have to get whiplash. We're going to be building a case over the first several weeks, and I plan to continue to update families on the things and items that I'm looking at that either show a positive direction towards returning to school, or if it's not good news and we're heading in a negative direction, to share that as well. It will take me a number of weeks through September to get a strong idea of reentry path and to be able to collect and feel like I have solid data to make that determination. And then we'll continue to monitor it as we move forward from there as well. And I think that, as a school district and as a community, there's variables that go into that. And looking at the actual spread of the virus, looking at, schools that are not at least 85% open all the time. I mean, people talk metrics. I mean, I'm looking at those things. I'll be looking at absolutely the number of individuals that are getting sick at comparable schools to ours and making that decision. But when we make that decision and it looks good, we're either going to look to have a set piece time. Hopefully, in my mind right now, my thinking is roughly 2 weeks from when we announce it to make those transitions so that we can reactivate our transportation and other systems to get people back into school and allow families time to make that adjustment to get back into school and set up and also disassemble their own pieces they have that are making either their distance or learning program work right now. So I think that's going to be ongoing. The reason I didn't pick a date, I know a lot of school districts, I heard giant school districts who just said, you know what, this entire year is going to be distance. And to me, no, that's not going to be for Clarkston. To me, I did want to have a solid idea of what the implications are and what schools are experiencing so that I can make the best decision for Clarkston. But if I set a date of the first semester, the first quarter, or October 15th, I think that totally negates the opportunity to continue to think on my feet, work with a team, work with a larger team outside the school district to make good decisions. Why handicap ourselves? My answer is I want to be back in as soon as possible. But as I mentioned on Monday night, and I won't go at length tonight, I have a set of criteria. We'll continue to evaluate and to share what we're seeing in that criteria. I mean, it's not a secret. I want to operate schools safely. I want to know that it's possible, and I want to know what the disruption factors. And I still want to get continued clarification from our health partners in terms of their supports of us. Those things I've worked on since Monday already, and I'm also thinking the possibility of looking at if it fits even a phased reentry in terms of looking at certain elements of our school district, especially our most needy or at-risk students coming back in first, looking at elementary building back in, especially lower L, which I can't wait to get back into school there, and then moving up through high school. So how we do it, I'm going to continue to study it day in, day out, and I'll continue to work and share my thinking and my plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kimberly asks, she says, my daughter is a 9th grader and was attempting to enroll in the temporary distance learning program. However, I am unsure how to enroll her into that program. I'll just take this one real quick. We've mentioned this earlier in the program that you don't need to do anything to enroll in the temporary distance learning contingency, and that is a part of our face-to-face instruction. So when you go back to school in the temporary distance learning model, you are also fully expecting and hoping to go back face-to-face, because that is our goal. Pam asks, for those participating in distance learning, when will we receive the teacher assignments for K-5? And we can also talk a little bit about secondary schedule pickup and how that's going to look a little bit different. Mrs. Mahoney, do you have insights on how and when our students will learn about their teachers?
So again, we're still working on staffing as we have this open forum of parents deciding. But as soon as our deadline, which is again Monday, we're going to be able to look at our staffing and move very quickly in terms of those assignments and placing kids. So after Monday, we're going to hit the ground running very hard, and communication will come out very soon as to when that can happen.
To think of it in a broader sense, we have over 1,000, Ms. Janzarek, students already enrolled or with the intent, and people can obviously change their mind, but have looked at that virtual option. I mean, obviously if we're staffing that roughly 30 to 1 or under, depending on age of the students for the virtual even, we're going to have to move staff from the brick and mortar or the temporary distance learning into that virtual or vice versa, depending on what you select. So as soon as that window closes on Monday morning for you to make the selection, Mr. Lucido, myself, and company will immediately look at, with Mr. Janzarek and Ms. Mahoney, what our total numbers and where they fall out in every building, because it's not going to fall out necessarily even from one school to another in terms of people's desire to be in virtual, nor will it even fall out between elementary or secondary. And we want to honor your desires in that respect by making sure that we can move staff to do it. And until we get that final staffing, which will be a Herculean effort by Mr. Lucido and company to match our students, their grade levels, their subject areas, their needs to be educated, that once that's determined, then we'll share it out. So I want to, we've never before, generally, just so that the community knows, staffing as it would be completed, we'd be looking at in the spring. We would be pulling together to make sure teachers were matching classrooms and our prospective staffing in April, May, and have that completed. Obviously, I've never had it done in really even June. I've never had it in July, but the nature of having to select and be flexible with our program, we're right into August trying to make it happen. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that's going to need to occur to make sure there's a matching teacher with every student.
And so again, this bears repeating for anyone who might have missed the top of our presentation tonight, that deadline for your decision to enroll in Clarkston Virtual has been extended to Monday at noon. It is no longer Friday at 5 p.m. So Abby asks, due to no face-to-face classes, orchestra is no longer a good fit. My daughter has enjoyed playing the viola since 6th grade, but her passion does not equal the discipline for distance learning with an instrument. So how would we go about dropping orchestra and filling her schedule with an alternative class, assuming it would be an elective? So now we're talking about, while we're talking about the staffing nuances, what about scheduling? And can we talk a little bit about folks who would have the desire to drop and add classes at this point? Is that a possibility for distance learning?
Yeah, I actually spoke with, our administration team along with John Lucido today. So again, we have to complete our staffing. That is number one priority as we look at our deadline Monday and the shifting of teachers. Sean Ryan, I just plugged in 1,000 divided by 30 and it's over 30 teachers. So that's our first priority, is to place our staff. Upon that, then we can start looking at our class and our course requests. And I believe that's when our counselors will be hitting the ground running in terms of what can we do to service our families in terms of their choices.
Okay, thank you. Mike asks, are there things that community residents can do to facilitate the success of Clarkston Virtual or distance learning? He says volunteers, donations, how can the community get involved? And thank you, Mike, and to everyone in our audience tonight who is thinking that way. We really appreciate the support.
Yes, and we are blessed in Clarkston to have that support, and we just thank you so much for that. And just, reading that question and thinking about it right off the top of my head, when we think about the food, let's say that it's on a Monday pickup, but we know that there's a family who they rely on that food, but they don't have the transportation or the ability to get to that food. Perhaps you could help get that food for them and bring it to them. Checking in with parents who, if this is a hard thing to do, and so how can you help support parents, even giving them a break or connecting with them to help with their kiddos with their schooling, and what does that look like? I think it's one of those things that we're going to have to continue to evaluate and have reach out to our community to say, hey, we need help with this. We've been very blessed with a lot of people from our churches and area communities and organizations who have said, how can we help? And I anticipate we will continue to get that kind of question.
Thank you. Next question is from Megan. She says, can we have a meet the teacher event in person for elementary students before school starts, similar to what was done with supply pickup in June? I think that's a very important part of the year, she says. Can we talk a little bit about how the buildings are handling that?
Right now we're being creative, and this will be a virtual process in terms of meeting our families, our students. And again, I think that, again, relationships, as Stacy has highlighted, Dr. Ryan has highlighted, are so important, that we want to meet our families. We want to know who you are and how your students think and feel and dream and building success upon them, but that will be done virtually.
And along those lines, for the secondary, I do know that we are moving picture day from, typically we would do that on a schedule pickup day. They'd get their schedules and have their yearbook photo taken. That is being rescheduled, and secondary schedules will be disseminated in a virtual format a week or so before school begins. But Teresa had a question along those lines as well. What things are being done for students entering new buildings, particularly sixth graders, as they are in a very new and unique situation? So can we talk a little bit about the teaming at Sashwa Middle School and how we're helping our rising sixth graders with this transition, and new students who aren't familiar with how we do things?
I think Liz Walker is on that. She's very excited to meet her kids and think creatively about how we can pull them together in a virtual setting just to celebrate and welcome them into the building. I think she'll be meeting with her teachers in terms of teams and, you know, going into those smaller pockets. It's definitely on their minds to create a welcoming environment and for those kids to feel at home in a virtual setting in a school.
We had also discussed when we do go back in a face-to-face model that we recognize that we'll have a lot of kids that are unfamiliar with the buildings. And so some of the things that we've talked about doing for those kids is, you know, there's a floor model, a map of each of our buildings that's available. We can put that on the website and we can tell them what classroom they're going to be in. They can map out where they need to be that very first day, so we'll be familiar, and we'll look for other ways that we can make these transitions positive for our students.
I think when we think about teachers in front of their students too, and utilizing cameras and introducing the classroom, like this is the classroom. It's, you know, they're sitting there just to kind of show them around, as to can't wait to have you here and to be together, and just to highlight you know, the spaces that they will soon enter is our goal.
Okay, guys, we got through a lot of questions from our email. At this point, it is 7:34, so we do have some time to sift through some of these questions that have popped up during this presentation and our panel discussion. But bear with us because Heidi and I are kind of reading through these as we go. Mrs. McLean, did any jump out at you while we were answering those last round of questions we can start with?
Yep, I just tried to find a couple that might not have been answered or might not have been clear in some of the explanation. We have one from, I believe it's Shane. How do we access online classes? Is it going to be through the Clarkston website or through some other format?
So for Clarkston Virtual, I'll take that side of it. The students would be in young 5s through 5th grade, would utilize the online platform of Lincoln Learning. And that would be an outside website, not within the Clarkston Community Schools website, but I would put links in there under the curriculum. Each student would have their own username and password that would also be shared with the families, and the families would also have access to that through a parent portal to see what's going on. And then for 6th through 12th grade, it would be similar in terms of the online platform outside of Clarkston schools, but we would utilize Pearson Connexus for that.
All right, thank you, Ken. Next question. I'm sorry, I don't see a name here.
Before we go to the next question, can you highlight, Ms. Mahoney, on looking at access through the distance learning platform as well?
I didn't want to.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So, you know, at the elementary level, we will be utilizing Seesaw as well as Google Classroom to access, and our teachers will be utilizing that to connect with their students as well as their families. And at the secondary level, we'll be using Google Classroom as well. So students, families will be able to access their learning through those platforms. As part of our professional learning that happened in the spring as well as continuing through the fall. And that will be the platforms united in our young 5s through 12.
So you're going to send me an email or a login or a letter letting me know how I get on the first day, and I don't have to feel anxious about that or knowing that I'm going to wonder what that's going to look like. I can be assured that that's going to be sent.
Yes, Dr. Ryan, absolutely.
I know my daughter's already waiting for it.
Okay, good.
Great, thank you. The next question I think would be maybe for Stacy. Melissa is wondering, I'd like more information on what Wellness Wednesdays might look like. If students don't necessarily need extra help, what is expected of them? And would this include things like pause time?
Okay. Thank you. I think with the hourly check-ins, that is with the teacher. And so the teacher may say, I need to check in with you, or you need to post something that allows me to know that you are still out there in the virtual setting. With the pause, yes, it's required. It is something that we expect our students to participate in. It is part of the school day. I will say too, in the spring, pause was actually the most attended class. So it's something that our students enjoy and need, especially for the connection with their peers.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Next question comes from Shauna. How are AP classes and advanced options addressed in the virtual program?
As we started our curriculum resource, one of the reasons why we did lean towards Pearson Connexus as our online platform was the number of additional classes through AP and advanced classes for our 6th through 12th grade students. So students that were scheduled for an AP or an advanced place or an honors class, we have those options available within the virtual online curriculum platform.
Thank you, Ken. The next question comes from an anonymous attendee. If we miss any of the live classes with the distance learning, will we be able to rewatch those? Are they being recorded?
We're working with our teachers to accommodate and really think and thoughtful about students that are not able to attend during the day. And just like in a face-to-face model, we'll be utilizing Google Classroom as well as Seesaw so that students can access at all times what is happening, what did they miss. And if there is certain key elements, we certainly need to make sure that those students are updated through whether it be video, whether it be an article to read. And again, our teachers will be collaborating to partner together. Perhaps it's, even a video of a colleague with a great lesson that they might highlight through their learning. So that communication will always occur again through those Google Classroom seesaws so that students can access and not feel behind.
And to kind of even piggyback on Ms. Mahoney, looking at, yes, they will have that constant direction from a teacher throughout that school day, but some will be working in small groups, some will be working individually, and then back to teacher so the teacher can work with individual students. So it wouldn't be simply as easy as putting a video camera on and then everything is set, because the last thing we want is a student to just for a straight school day. It's unimaginable to me at any grade level that all they're going to be doing is sitting in front of a screen, absorbing information all day. They're human beings. So I think teachers and a lot of conversations I've already listened to of teachers meeting and giving me feedback is they see as much movement in terms of changing activities, changing modalities, changing social media type things as far as what they're putting up and what students are working next to their computers or at tables or with maybe other students that they're, if they're in a small pod, if they're working along with them. I think really the goal is to keep it moving through a day. I think if you're sitting there stuck, I'm thinking back to even being in high school and teachers that lecture for an entire hour. Is that really, even no matter what format, whether it's in person or on computer, is that really the best we can do? And I'm going to say absolutely not. So I'm expecting some great innovation out of this, and I can't wait. And for the students listening, I'm sorry, but I see great revolution from the learning that I see going on with our teachers for these lessons to continue right through any potential snow day for the next bunch of years that Dr. Ryan's here. Yes, we're going to still try to work in times for going sledding and things like that, but we can be a lot more conservative in our approach if we can immediately switch through different type of learning things. So I think that the learning here is going to be pretty amazing that way. So probably more of the answer than you wanted, but thank you.
And I think in the distance learning model, our teachers aren't going to have their eyes on these students all the time. There's going to be independent work. There's going to be collaboration between classmates. That will happen. So there will be independent work as well.
But for segments and not for long blocks or extended amount of time. Not a list, but here's this, come back, let's look at it. I see a tremendous amount of engagement involved. And that's the kind of the word I would use that would help me understand the difference between what my own children experienced in the spring and now. That level of engagement, and even as a parent, as a teacher, that came up. Even if a parent is assisting a student, they're going to be on a direct piece of what they're working on. It's not going to be going on a list of assignments to complete or something like that. Not at all. Very much as breaks in between teacher directed and then students being able to work individually, or why a teacher, again, was working with a small group of students in a different breakout room electronically. So there's a lot of learning that has occurred, and I can't wait to see what we're going to put together even past this. So thank you, Ms. Mahoney.
Healthy balance.
Balance, good word.
I see a couple that I'm curious about myself. Stephanie asks, do colleges look at both programs as equal for college-bound students? I think she's referring to Clarkston Virtual and wanting to make sure that her son or daughter gets into Michigan State.
Absolutely. Virtual's been around for many years in terms of offerings for students within the high school level. So yes, that does fit in the transcript the same as a traditional class. When students move into the college level, they will be utilizing some of those experiences within a virtual class at that college level.
Okay, great. And can you talk a little bit, I've seen this one, I don't know if it's in this chat, but I've seen emails about this. Can you talk a little bit about honors, AP, and how those, if a student wants to transition back to face-to-face instruction at the semester, I know they're called something different, perhaps in Clarkston Virtual, and how do we make that a seamless transition for them back?
If a student was to transition back, let's say within an AP course, definitely we would have to look at that content that they were already working through. So when they went back into that seated environment, that AP teacher had a definite knowledge base of where they were coming from. And that can be done by utilizing the online platform of seeing those standards covered. So as those students transition back, we will be able to, just like we're going to use their course schedule on Monday to start looking at scheduling classes, we'll be able to do that reverse in terms of if they chose to move back into the traditional. Yes, they might be called something different, but we'll be able to red flag those classes to ensure that as a student moves from virtual to traditional or traditional to virtual, that we honor those schedules for them.
Okay. Changing gears a little bit. Tara asks, when will we be receiving a supply list for students? It sounds like they may need more items than a normal in-person school year. And I forgot to mention, we did get a question from Maddie in our email this week, and she says, when will the supply list come out? I'm a second grader at SPE. Also, I'm excited to see which teacher I get and who is in my class. So what can we tell Tara and Maddie?
Again, as soon as that staffing is complete, we are on it. And so our teachers will be communicating everything I think that our families need to know in terms of supplies. We also have supplies that we want curbside pickup for our families to come pick up to prepare for students for at-home learning. Even we think about construction tech, we think about third grade. This is a young 5s through grade 12 set up for success. So we're going to think that strong. As soon as our staffing is in order, we will be on it.
Great. Courtney is asking, what if we have additional questions we'd like answered that were not addressed here in order to make an informed decision by the deadline of this Friday? Again, the deadline is extended to Monday at noon, so you have a little bit more time, but she said, how should parents go about getting those questions answered? And Courtney, you can feel free to email us at thefall2020@clarkston.k12.mi.us, and we'll make sure that the appropriate team member fields your specific question. And that goes for anyone who has a question that we haven't addressed here. If it's a more specific question about your child's learning experience or scheduling or things like that, those might be better addressed with your building administrator or counselor when we get closer to school.
And hopefully we can create kind of a transcript of the questions tonight and the answers and any additional ones that come in into that kind of the FAQ for this. That'll be kind of running all the way through that deadline.
Thank you. That's right. There's, I think, 3 FAQ sections for different areas about our fall plans on our website now. We have one for health protocols. We have one for distance learning. We have one for Clarkston Virtual. So hopefully we're knocking them out one at a time and bringing some clarity to everyone who's wondering what's going to happen. Heidi, did you see some questions in here that might be good?
I did find a couple of other ones. We had a question, what if my child needs a sick day or has an appointment? How are we handling attendance, and do I need to call them in to a school?
I think that's a really good question. We will be having secretaries in the building to receive phone calls to inform our teachers who is not attending. I'd like to continue that process to keep that system alive, and I think that's very good.
Okay. Laura asks, are you still planning to start the school on August 31st? At this time, that is our plan. We are still looking at that plan to make sure that we are ready to provide an exceptional academic experience for your students, that our teachers are prepared in this new model of learning that is going to far exceed what we experienced in the spring. So yes, at this time, that is the plan. Oh, Kurt asks, he says that kindergarten will be using iPads. Where does the financial burden fall to procure one? Angela, I believe, answered this, but we'll restate it. Every student and staff member in our district will be provided a district-owned device, an iPad or a Chromebook, and that is, there is no expense to staff and families for those, the use of those.
Here's another question from Jesse. If our student begins with a distance learning platform and the decision is made to return to face-to-face learning, will there be an option to either enroll in Clarkston virtual if the student is not comfortable returning, or I did see another question similar to that, would there be an option to continue distance learning from home?
You know, that's why we're doing this education now to the community, so families can make a decision. If they are concerned about that happening during the first semester, then the choice for that family, I think, would be Clarkston virtual versus the distance learning model, because it is our intent with the distance learning model to return to face-to-face instruction.
I think any transition between Clarkston virtual and distance or face-to-face at that time is at semesters. So we're looking at an August or January timeframe in terms of entering and exiting.
Okay, here's one about Clarkston virtual from an anonymous attendee who asks, will secondary students enrolled in Clarkston virtual work through their current school's guidance counselor to decide their classes?
With the first semester, we're going to utilize the schedules and the requests that students put in with their counselors in the spring. As we transition into the second semester, we do have additional staff for Clarkston virtual in terms of counselors that the students will work through. But if relationships have been built and there's been communication with those high school counselors, that will transition over to the two counselors that we're going to be utilizing for Clarkston virtual.
Here's a question from Nicole. Will we still follow the original school calendar regarding half days or no school days?
We will, yes.
Okay, there still seems to be a couple of questions about enrolling in our distance learning model. And so just to clarify, if you want to move with the district back to face-to-face instruction when the time comes and start the year in a distance learning model with the majority of students in the district and our teachers in a very synchronous real-time model, there is nothing you have to do. You only have to complete a form if your intention is to enroll in Clarkston virtual.
And maybe even just an add-in as a parent, you know, I know that our families are struggling with the idea, what happens when Ryan pulls the cord and gets us back into school? I would have you critically evaluate, if you look at the world we're in right now in terms of the state of the virus, there's a lot of evidence to suggest to me that that's not the deciding factor right now for me. Obviously, looking at right now, being in the stage we are and the levels, there's definitely evidence to support a return to school in some facets. The major struggles I have, in addition to the unknowns of pulling all of our children and staff back into the same environment is what happens for school continuity. And I think that if things remain the same and we see that school can be conducted in a way that's not disrupted, where we're closing down parts of schools and major, I'll call it day-to-day rolling closures and things like that, and we still get a positive overall levels within the virus, within our community and within the state, then I would put the bet that if I'm not comfortable now, I would pick the virtual option, because we need to just kind of continue to put our pieces together to get us back into school. And some of those pieces are shaping up to me in a positive way. So if the world seems crazy to you right now and you can't imagine any scenario where your student would be going back to school, then I would definitely lean towards that virtual option. And I want families also here. It's not because we don't want to do the work, or it requires us to reschedule students. It's really the disruptive nature that when you're in the self-paced virtual program, working along a pacing and a structured curriculum that is not exactly aligned with the distance learning piece that's in school, then you would have a student that would return back into school, maybe already covered half of what they already had. Maybe they were upside down in some of the areas to where the learning would seem very disjointed. And by the end of the term, did we really get through Algebra 1? Well, maybe we got the first half twice. Or maybe I already did the whole thing down to the last week and you guys are only halfway through. I mean, the par to par is where we get the advantage on the distance learning part, because the Clarkston teachers will keep that pacing, and as soon as we get back into school, continue that pacing where they left off. So it's very much a structural from the student standpoint, not from the school standpoint. And some of the very strengths that make the virtual option good for families make it difficult to transition back into regular school. So the more flexibility, and we know families need different things, that you add into it, the more difficult it is to put back into that, go from distance back into that in-person learning format. So I just wanted you to kind of hear that collectively. Will we hear your concerns if you're, whatever your situation is? Absolutely. We will work and try to figure out your individual circumstances. But on a macro level, I can tell you that it won't line up. And we don't want to just put a placeholder for what an education experience is. We're taking very seriously that the course objectives, the grade level objectives are completed as part of our educational process. So that's what you see the team here. That's what they were working with me all day long, and we're trying to explain it into the night. So it's kind of like a rolling design and share type system right now overall. But we'll get there. We got the time to kind of pull it together. And if we don't, I'll make sure that we make adjustments to make sure that everything is ready, including the technology. There's a lot of facets that need to come together in the next couple of weeks so that I'm comfortable to say we're ready to roll. And when I'm ready to roll, we will roll. And that's how it'll go. And that's, obviously no system will be absolutely perfect out of the box. But I feel like we're definitely on our way when it comes to kind of creating a solid experience. And I think that's what we want. And I take responsibility for what we've done up to now. And I'm excited moving forward, because I think we have the right know-how, and we're gonna be in a good spot. So I appreciate the question.
Okay, we have time for just a few more, and I see this one a couple of times here. Janelle asked, she says, I appreciate that the device will be provided, but curious if we are limited to using that school issued device, or can we choose to provide our own?
Okay, so one of the reasons that we went to one-to-one was for standardization of devices, and it helps with support. It helps with, teachers being able to support their kids if they have problems too. That being said, if your student is comfortable on a Windows device, if they are logging into their Gmail and they're logging into Chrome using their district email, they're still going to get those apps and benefits to a certain extent. It's not going to hinder them if you really want to use your own device. It will be difficult for us to help support it technically if you have students on Windows devices and students on MacBooks and students on their iPhones. It just becomes difficult for us to support it.
I think the support issue is important, but the safety issue is what kind of compelled me, because I was ready to make it more flexible of students just signing up, and if families were good, and then they were good. But then I started looking into the ramifications of what students can get involved with online. I think as parents, we all know that. As a school district, you have a district device, we have to make sure that not only are we doing those screening pieces for student safety, but just where they're going and what they're getting into. We need to make sure that somebody's guarding the door when your student is at school, and you might not be on top of every second of what they're doing, of where they're logging in and where they're at. That to me is a critical safety component.
Yep.
We had another question in terms of IEPs, and wondering what the Students Week will look like. Is there specific support only on 1 or 2 days, or is it more of a one-to-one support throughout the week?
That'll depend on individual student needs. I think for our level 3-4 programs, it'll be something where there will be groups of students coming in and accessing those services. They will be scheduled so parents know in advance, but the exact days and time frame, we haven't worked out the details. And again, we will communicate with parents in the next week or two before finalizing any plans.
And then kind of along those lines too, we had a question from Angie about working parents receiving help with children that are struggling with maybe reading, or need some other extra support in other areas, reading or math.
So if it's a student with an IEP, we will provide accommodations and additional support so that they can access and be successful within those other classes. If it's a student that doesn't have an IEP, I think that, again, we'll work as a team with the teachers to make sure that those students have access points to whatever platform they're using within that classroom.
And again, gen ed teachers are really looking at small group strategy groups, especially utilizing those Wednesdays in those nice chunks of time that we can pull small groups to really support our struggling readers, our struggling writers, anyone who is struggling, even social emotional, just to tap into the needs and respond.
Okay, well, that looks like that's about all the time that we have for tonight. I want to thank our panelists for coming on and providing such wonderful information. We hope that this brings clarity for you. If you do have any lingering questions, again, visit our website. It's just our district, Clarkston Schools District website /fall2020. And I mentioned the email address earlier, which is on that website, that you can submit more questions. We'll be updating our frequently asked questions on that website, so you can refer back to it. We will also be posting our slides from this presentation on our website. And as we mentioned earlier, this session was recorded. We did have a little glitch in the first 10 minutes, which probably isn't so bad considering the technical difficulties we were experiencing, but we will fill in the blanks with the presentation when we post that up and share our commentary. So thank you once again to all who joined here, and big thanks to our panelists as well.
And I want to thank everybody as well, but also even informative. You learn something new every time you do something in my book, and I always try to draw learnings from experiences. And looking at that 2020 email address, it's been great because everything that comes in can be sorted. If it's a simple question that's just technical, it goes right to that individual who can handle that technical question. If it's a concern or a larger, even a complaint or an accolade, all of them get collated to me. And then if it has a certain aspect that either happy, sad, or indifferent, but it relates to technology, I get it, and so does Ms. Harrison. If it's academic and or me, which most things seem to fall on me at some point or another, but then Ms. Mahoney gets it as well. It's a great way to organize when we have a lot of questions and a lot of interested parties who want to make sure that we hear their input. To be able to organize it, and for me to be able to kind of look through it kind of as a report every day is extremely helpful. So I want to thank everybody who's been utilizing and sending that, and thank everybody tonight. And I appreciate our families who are tuning in as we try different ways to try to reach you. I appreciate everybody in the panel, and I hope that we were able to help you this evening as families, and most of us up here are parents as well. And I think that we're going to continue to take this one day at a time. So we appreciate everything you're doing as families, because we know this is an extremely trying time, but we look forward to continuing on working together. We're going to get there. I believe it. And stay tuned, and absolutely a lot more to come. Ms. Rowe, do you have anything to close us out then?
Nope. That's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.